Yeah, no, there was a study, I think about 2 years ago now, where they calorically restricted two groups of individuals, and the intervention was that they allowed one group to sleep 8 hours. They restricted sleep to 5 hours in the second group. In that second, they both lost about the same amount of weight. Actually, the group that slept 5 hours a night lost like 2 kilos, and the group that slept 8 hours lost 1.9 kilos, right?
Yeah.
What they did that was more sophisticated was they did body composition.
Body comp, yeah, cool.
Group that slept 5 hours lost 60% more muscle, 50% less fat. Group that slept 8 than the group that slept 8 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, there's
huge,
no doubt, you know what I mean? That, getting that integration time and getting that sleep and that repair and that recovery. I mean, I always use the heart as a nice example of life where people are like, wow, the heart's always working. It's beating as soon as it stops beating, you start beating, right? But no matter what the heart rate is, it maintains a 1/3 work, 2/3 rest ratio.
Yeah.
And so that's a great kind of thing that I think that we should bring into our lives. And it's one of those things where, I actually think that, some of the work that you started with the self-experimentation, and then when you start having the personal digital health
Was it Rio? Was that the sleep thing?
Zio.
Oh, Zio. Yeah, it's unfortunate they went out of business.
Yeah, Ben Rubin.
It was good. I really enjoyed that.
It was ahead of its time. That's the problem.
Yeah.
People didn't understand what goal was.
Well, right. Not to totally pull us off track, but there's no track, so there's no fault there. It's unfortunate when you have fantastic ideas and implementation that are just 2 or 3 years early.
It was 2 or 3 years early.
And as a result, it's really expensive, right? Because the componentry, especially in, say, hardware, hasn't become cheap enough. Mass adoption isn't there. Like Quantified Self, I was at the very first Quantified Self meeting, I think it was in 2008, at Kevin Kelly's house, founding editor of Wired in Pacifica, just in a living room with 20-some people and a whiteboard. And I talked about performance-enhancing drugs and freaked everybody out. It was great.
Yeah.
And, it was a weird fringe thing then. It's like, but now how many people have Nike Fuel Bands? How many people have Jawbone Bands? How many people have Fitbits? And it's become a normal thing. And I remember people were asking me, they're like, when is this?
How about counting your macronutrient blocks? That's QSing.
Yeah.
I mean, like just being self-aware.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, so, Zio was a few years ahead of its time, and it just, as many are, when you're on the front line, it's like, all right, you're going to take the arrows first. You're just a couple of years early. It's just like there were MP3 players before the iPod too early. And then Jobs came in and was like, thanks for doing a lot of free R&D for us.
Right.
That looks really promising. Now we're going to kill you all.
Here's what you can do. Have a cup of coffee at 1:00 in the afternoon. See how your quality of your sleep is. Don't drink caffeine after, but you keep your caffeine in the morning. You can test this.
Yeah.
These are where Zio was a great way of actually measuring it and seeing it. The quality of your sleep sucks when you have that 4:00 pick me up.
Oh, definitely. And it's this is something that Seth Roberts has talked about a lot. Who's a professor emeritus from Berkeley. Have you guys ever met Seth?
No.
He's an interesting guy. He's a very, very smart guy. He wrote this diet. He wrote a book called The Shangri-La Diet, which sounds almost as bad as the 4-hour work week in terms of like information,
Whatever. I named Becoming a Supple Leopard because of you, motherfucker.
Oh, it's perfect. No, I like your title.
Catches in your car, you can't forget it. People are like, what's a supple leopard? I'm like, for our body, bitches.
Yeah.
Seriously, that was the ethos. Thank you very much, Tim Ferriss.
You're welcome. And it's like the more like an infomercial product sounds, the more mileage you're going to get out of it. So Supple Leopard's fucking money. I like it. Where the hell was I going with all this? So the
Shangri-La diet.
That's right. So Seth noticed that if you consume calories, it could literally be sugar water, sucrose in water. If you consume calories that are disassociated from a known food, and you pinch your nose so you void the olfactory portion of it, you can inhibit your appetite by like 40%. Kilocalories consumed per day. It's fucking wild shit, right? And
but how do we dissociate that in the first place?
Yeah, no. But what's so fascinating? I mean, the point that Seth has made before is that science is good at testing hypotheses. Traditional science is not good at coming up with novel ideas. And if you want to, and I think that the American public and just the global public in general, but I think especially in the US, in lieu of religion, has come to treat like science in quotation marks as like the church, the gospel.
Correct. Absolutely.
And therefore they're like, oh, well, how do you know that? They have a couple of buzzwords that they can throw around, which is like, has there been a double-blind,
randomized,
placebo-controlled, blah, 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 on diet? And you're like, no, because the following 100 reasons. No one can profit from it, therefore it's hard to find funding. Secondly, it's a longitudinal study, really expensive. Thirdly, it's observational, so blah, blah, blah. They can infer but not prove, cause and effect, blah, 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 blah. So what that means is like, if you really want to figure out, like, is coffee fucking up my sleep? You have to do it yourself. It's not going to be sponsored by the government or the NIH. Sorry. It's just not going to happen. And if it's going to happen, it's going to take 5 to 10 years. So guess what? Surprise, you're responsible for your own life and you need to test it yourself. The good news is with tools, whether it's a Zeo or you could use a band that, and this is an inference obviously, but that measures movement, you can get an indication of what might be, say, deep sleep. And that's really empowering. I mean, I'm just like so excited. I cannot wait until we get to a point where you can track important biomarkers without a phlebotomist, right? Because right now it's like, that's just expensive. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of mailing.
It's not all the time. Like it's not right now, every day. You know, there's a lot of distance between the cup and the lip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
wait, explain it. This is, I like how that sounds.
Many a slip betwixt the cup and the lip. That's the joke. But like, the issue is
I've never heard that. I'm so embarrassed. I feel uncultured.
You are sitting with two doctors.
Yeah, that's true.
Even though you are the most experienced amongst us. Just that notion that if I see, I get a panel every 3 months or once a month because I'm really ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes on. How did I manage that piece at work? I went through 2 weeks. My kid didn't sleep. You know, I think what's interesting now is we're seeing so many people, you know, come up with best practice. I'm like, are you a monk? Do you not like? I started playing around with RestWise. Did you know Matt Weatherly White and those guys at RestWise?
Yeah, what's RestWise? I don't know.
Well, it was they came up with a really good algorithm for are you recovering from your workout or not?
Is this like heart variability testing?
No HRV. They looked at SaO2, so your oxygen saturation in the morning. Because if you dipped a couple beats, then you saw inflammation in your lungs. So you could actually, if you know that question, the burning old question, we figured this out because we were watching it. I have a cold. Do I exercise or not? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And 50% of the time you gamble and you're like, bam, I got better.
You're making a jerking up
No,
motion.
that's jerking.
That's the dice
Gambling.
throw. Okay.
I don't know how you. So,
oh wow,
and 50,
that was Jenny James.
50% of the time, I exercise and I get sick. Well, it turns out that if you just track, you can get a little oxygen sensor on eBay or on Amazon
They're
for like
cheap.
$10 now.
They're so cheap.
Right? So that technology is brought down. You can, and if you dip 1 or 2 points, you're seeing inflammation in the lungs, which indicates the severity of your cold. That it's not upper respiratory, it's starting to go lower respiratory, and now you shouldn't breathe hard because you're going to blow that out. And we for athletes, we're saying, hey, don't exercise if you see this thing, and people were able to train through colds or not train through colds. But they looked at, you know, that heart rate in the morning, resting heart rate, obviously old marker, soreness, a whole bunch of things. It took like 45 seconds to kind of do the gambit. But our daughters used to come charge us in the morning and, you know, and we'd go from 0 to I'm awake. Holy shit. Like, what's going on? And my heart rate would spike every morning and I wouldn't lay there quietly taking my heart rate. And we were like, well, this is fucked. And like, so, I think this is the problem. Like I ask every single professional team and I go everywhere and see them all. I'm like, do you use heart rate variability? Do you use some kind of metric of, you know, with you following Joel Jameson or someone else looking at heart rate, you know, and they're like yes or no, because it's so sophisticated, but we're getting the snapshot of a 22-year-old who went out and drinking Monster Red Bulls and, you know, and it doesn't, it's a lot of misplaced precision.
Yeah. Well,
there's a couple things that I want to comment on that you brought up. Like, well, one is that the interesting thing is that I think that one of our problems in progress, in no matter what field we're talking about, is that we assume that we know what the hell we're talking about. In that we're going to perfect, further. Right. Absolutely. So, because you just said, we wanted to look at this and observe. I mean, in all these big breakthroughs in science and medicine oftentimes are kind of these observations that are unintended. Observations. Cialis and Viagra being a huge one. Penicillin being a huge one, right? So I think that, when you're talking about digital health technology or self-experimentation, the opportunity there is discovery. And when you have an N of 1, you have self-discovery. When you have 5 million N of 1s, then you have a collective discovery. And so I actually think that, like health tracking and personal health devices, I think it's actually going to be part of like the next human rights movement, where we actually get to understand and know how damaging some of the aspects of society and work and our work-life balance and all that stuff actually really impacts us. Another thing that I thought of...
Nailed. 100% agree with that.
Yeah. No, and another thing that you actually bring up that I think is a good counterpoint is that I'm actually working with a individual, Sammy Inkinen, who was one of the co-founders or founders of Trulia, the real estate website.
Yeah.
And he is a really big triathlete, and he and his wife they actually decided that they're going to enter into the open ocean rowing race from Monterey to Hawaii, right? And they don't have open ocean experience, and then they're going to do it on a low carbohydrate diet to bring awareness to kind of like the dangers of fructose and high carbohydrates and that sort of thing. And their expedition's called Fat Chance. It's really interesting, and so, but
that's a lot to take on.
It is. No, it's amazing, and actually,
Zabriskie trained this whole last year using UCAN. This modified starch.
Yeah, super starch.
Yeah, and
I just got some UCAN over there.
These modified starches now, and not to hijack what you're saying, but this is so interesting, but like people are tinkering with millions of dollars on the line.
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely. I mean, and what the one thing
I'm going to be the S for a second. Who's Zabriskie?
Zabriskie, the track superstar. David Zabriskie, cycling badass.
Okay, cool.
But started working with Mark Sisson. Because, what we're finding is now, as you said...
Oh, he works with Mark.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
N of 1 becomes N of 500 and N of 1,000. We start to know patterns. It's about pattern recognition.
It is.
And you can't eat like a douchebag, even if you're an endurance athlete, buffering it with exercise, and all of a sudden you stop and whoop, you fall apart. Like, you have to come out unharmed at 1 rep or at 1,000,000 reps or 1,000,000 days.
Yeah. Because
you're going to be 110. And if you're into pre-diabetic...
Right.
And your 40s or 50s, because you're a triathlete, eating exactly what they told you to eat.
Gels 100 times.
Well, we didn't know. Okay, how many gels do I need? Kelly,
Right.
So, this is so interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so to finish with Sammy, like one of the things I really appreciate when I first met him, we were talking, and he said, look, I was training for a triathlon, and I started doing, heart rate variability and tracking and just really getting very comprehensive about what he was doing. And he was trying to figure out what his edge for overtraining and his training volume was. And he said at the end of like 9 months of doing all these different, basal body temperatures, morning heart rate variability, he said that what he found was the most reliable, source of information for him was when he woke up, what his instinct was. How did I feel today? And he said that was the most reliable indicator of how much he can push volume and train. And the beautiful thing about that is that, some people would say, well then look at all that bullshit of heart rate variability and stuff, which I think is a fantastic piece of information. I also think that, mental emotional states, really can influence that just as much as physiologic states like overtraining. And so it's tricky, right? But at the same time, like his journey, of looking into this led him to a heightened state of confidence in his inner compass. And like, to me, I think that that's ultimately the victory, because a lot of times when I'm working with, really interesting people and high level executives and people that can kind of spend some of their resources into kind of looking and analyzing and all this technologically advanced tools and data, which is really fun. At the end of the day, what I really want to give back to people is kind of this empowerment that listen to yourself, get involved with yourself, have a high expectation for your life and for your health and for what you can achieve, and go after it. You don't need all the technology.